Hey guys, and welcome back to another session. The thing is that when we were doing our plus equals, for some reason our variable scope at the global wasn't being respected. We'll maybe throughout the training we'll figure out why that was. And we weren't adding the right amount. So what was happening is we were resetting for whatever question we got correct. As long as we got this last one correct, I believe. Actually, no, because it's only ifs. As long as we got one correct, it was always setting it to just you got one right. And that's not the behavior we wanted. So we're able to find, hey, the behavior the adding of our correct questions was not occurring correctly. Very cool. So take out our debugging print statement for our correct amount. And let's look at our test. So like our question Q&A. So there's a couple of things I like, a couple of things I don't like. One of which is like, for example, if we go through and we run this, if I type in blue, let's say if I have cap locks, pizza, golf, sports, and then heat, it's going to tell me I got everything wrong. Why is that? Let's check it out. So if we look back at our ask question, check answer, we take in a question, we take in an answer, we prompt the question, we then get the response, stored in a variable called user response, and then we check if the user response is equal to the answer. So this is pretty interesting. And this is interesting for multiple reasons. So first, my thought process is, maybe the case sensitivity of what the user is putting in matters when we're evaluating strings and comparing them to each other. And let's say if I wanted to test it out real quick, I can do that really easy in Python. And the way I can do that is I can just type in Python, and Python will actually give me access to the runtime. This is kind of really popular with what's called runtime languages. So Node.js being another runtime for the JavaScript language to do backend server-side code. And Node works the same way. You can type in Node and you can get like an IDE. So if we look at Python, we have the same thing. We can type in Python and we get access to the actual runtime now. So I can define variables. So I can say like name equals, then I can print out my name and I'll print it back. And this pretty much gives us access to the Python runtime where we can actually experiment and write some stuff. So what I want to do is I want to say, I could do like name equal, let's see, captain. It's going to give us back false, right? Sometimes, like my thought process is let's test the case sensitivity of string comparison, right? If I have a string and another string and we compare it and the cases are different, does that matter? And let's see, let's type it all lowercase like we did before. And it's true. So off the bat, that's telling me this does matter. So what's a good way to solve this? Now to get out of the Python IDE, which I do want to do, I believe we can type quit. Yeah, we did type quit and we call it as a function. Because remember that function does exist. We used it, I believe, in our last, we used exit or quit, one of them. I think they're both aliases to either the same underlying function or they could be slightly different. Actually, let's check. Yeah, I'm interesting. No return, then exit. Yeah, I think they're aliases. Quit code, exit code. And they might be slightly different, because they're different implementations. But anyways, we can just call that in our Python runtime, and that will exit the Python runtime for us. We call it exit or quit as a function, and boom, we're done. All right, so we learned that there is case sensitivity importance when we're comparing strings. So the way that I'm thinking about this off the bat is what we could do, in our last greeting function application, or our greeting application, we did use a string method to scream, one time, how are you, with the methods on the string objects. So what I'm thinking about is, what if we just made all of them lowercase? We lowercase the answer, and we lowercased the string. What if we did that? Now this is going to tell me that there's no method on answer, And the reason for that is because this function doesn't know answer is going to always be a string. We can talk about that at a later date. Since we're using this and we always know we're passing a string as an answer, we can still do dot lower method on it. The reason why is, remember, this is a runtime language. It's a language that is invoked at runtime and analyzed at runtime. So it's a weakly typed language. It doesn't require you to enforce the types. We'll talk about like the string types, integer types, boolean value types. All these things are types. It doesn't require us to enforce these on our in our functions and in our methods. It's nice to have, but you don't need it. But as your application grows, it's going to be beneficial to get it. And we'll probably talk about, how do we enforce types and add in some static typing helping at a later time. Probably not today, but Python does support this as well, which is really cool because then it allows you to feel really comfortable when you're writing your code that, hey, this function is a string. It does take 2 strings, because right now when we check it, ask question, check answer, all we know is it takes a question and answer. We don't know, is a question a string? Is an answer a string? Are they something else? We don't know. We're just assuming. But so let's try this, right? So let's rerun our program. And let's type all capitals, blue, golf, Wii Sports, and let's type in heat. And boom, we got 100% right. So obviously I typed this in capitals, and we're lowering the user response. So blue is going to be blue all lowercase. We're also lowercasing the answer. So whether blue was also like blue all capital, it wouldn't, or even kind of all janked up like this, like camel casing within the string, and we ran this and we typed in blue, and we'll just keep going. We'll say we got 20%. It marked blue right, which is good. So the .to lower is working as we expected. We're lowercasing those strings and we're comparing them correctly, and we're getting the output expected. Cool. So we solved that problem of the strings not matching, which is great, right? So now we're prompting our questions now, and we're getting a response, and we're calculating the correct question. So this is how a beginner programmer, in my opinion, could code this up. I think it's a little bit even more advanced because we're using this ask question check answer function. But just because we're using that doesn't mean you can't have a function as a new beginner programmer. But it does kind of make this, in my opinion, a little bit more of a beginner programmer that has learned functions and understands the concept pretty well. Otherwise, we probably might just have the input, a comparison, an add, and then over and over again, it might be a little bit more verbose down here. It might be this code over and over again, repeated as we go through it. And I think that's not bad. I think that there's other things to think about, especially when we're defining the user response and setting all that stuff. But at the core, this is pretty good. Gotta drink some water, stay hydrated. So I want to kind of take that and show what I would think the next evolution of this would be. And there's a couple different ways we can take this, right? Like, what would an intermediate, programmer code up if they wanted to write a Q&A question program? And there's a couple different ways we can take this. There's a couple different data structures we can use. And I think I'm going to use 2. I'm going to specifically use 2 for this. I'm going to do what I would consider to be like a list variant of this, and then a dictionary variant of this. Obviously, there's a clear winner of which one's better, and we'll see why. But we'll do the list one first. And what I want to do is I want to create a question list, and I want to create an answer list. This is how we define list in Python. List, array, they could be called either or. Now, in some languages, those things mean very different things, a list and an array. Or there's even sometimes terminology called slices, especially when you get to like the Go programming language. if you choose to. Go is a great programming language. You know, not trying to hard sell you here, but it's probably one of my favorite programming languages, to be honest with you. Um, but essentially what this is a list of things, right? So kind of very straightforward, right? You could have multiple like different strings in here. So you can have like, you know, a name, you can have a list of names. You can just have a whole bunch of different names in a list. You can actually have a list of integers. So you can like count up in a list. Enter a list of scores, so you can say like this first one's 60%, or second one's 60%, third one's 40%. You know, so you can have a list of like scores of the test. There's a lot of different types. You can have a list of truth values, so you can have a whole bunch of different like true or falses in a list. And this is pretty cool for a lot of different things. Obviously, we're not seeing the value here, but we're going to when we apply it to our Q&A. So what I want to do is I want to create a list of questions and answers. So what we're going to do is we're going to start taking our questions, and we're going to start copying them, our questions and answers. We're going to start copying them into our list. We'll just go ahead and take some copy pasta, and we'll start going ahead and adding them to our list. Like, you could be faster to just write these out. We'll do golf, add in sports, and then our. Let's just grab in our question for basketball. Let's remove all of this logic here for how we were invoking our stuff. Now we have our two lists. We have our question list and our answer list. So what we can do here is the first thing I want to check is I want to make sure that you know, that I have the same amount of questions as answers. Actually, we'll do that later. So what we can do is we can use these questions and answers to ask our questions and answers. Pretty, you know, ask a question, check the answer, and pass them into our function. Pretty basic stuff. And the way we can do this is we can do what's called we can do iteration, right? So there's a lot of different ways to you know, iterate in Python, but the iteration we want to do is we probably want to you know, iterate as many times we have a question, and then ask the question, ask the answer. So there is one thing I want to show you. Let's open up the Python terminal again. It's kind of pretty important. So let's paste in. We're just going to grab our answer. I think that's pretty easy. So we're just going to paste that in here, and now we have a new variable called answer. We can check that because we can do a print statement, and we'll just pass in our variable called answer list, and we'll get back a list of answers once we typed. So I want to show you that we can actually, there's these, a list has what's called indexes, or index spaces. So in the 0 index, we have blue. The first index is pizza. Second is golf. Third is Wii Sports. And fourth is heat. The reason why is we always count from 0 to 1. So if we wanted to get like the first item in a list, you can do answer list 0, and you'll get back the blue string. You can also do answer list 3, and we'll get back Wii Sports. If we wanted golf, we can give it 2. And if we wanted heat, we can give it to 4. Now, something also really interesting is if you wanted the last item on the list, you can actually pass in -1, and it will get the heat. If you pass in -2, it will count backwards. It'll give you Wii Sports. -3 will give you golf. -4 will give you pizza. -5, which will be back at 0, will be blue. Because the length of that list is 5, right? There's 5 things. So if you take, you know, and 5 away from 5, that puts us back at the 0. Now, if you go past the list, you get what's called an index out of range. So meaning that we only have 5 things in the list, and you're thinking, well, you passed in 5, you know, why didn't that work? Well, the reason that didn't work, I just want to get this, I want to put the list out. The reason 5 didn't work is we only really have 4 index locations. Remember, we count from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, there is no 5. Okay, so I can't ask for 5, because there's nothing there. And this is going to cause an error. We're going to get an index error, right? So let's go ahead and now that we know that we have a list, we're able to get items out of the list based on their index location. let's think about how we can use this new long, and then we understand that we can't go beyond the list, the length of the list, otherwise we'll get an error. Let's understand how we want to code this up. And there's a couple of different ways to do it. So what we can do is we can iterate for the amount of items in a list. And there's a couple different ways to do this. This is something really interesting in Python, and something I like about the language is you do have this really cool like range function that we can leverage. We can also loop over the list itself, which I think is pretty unique. We could, do a traditional for loop, which is pretty much very practical in other languages. And we'll probably do that, right? So what we can say is we can start at 0, and then what we can do is we can say we want to loop for as many times that I is not greater than or equal to the length of a list, and we'll give it the question list. So the question list is going to be, for example, there's 5 items in it, and we can double check that, because if we go back into Python, we'll grab the answer list just because it's the closest one. And then if we do like length of answer list, we get back the count. That's going to give us 5, right? Now you can't do, like, obviously length of answer list, get the, like, this will give us an index out of range, because they're obviously, we start at 0, we go to 4 because there's 5 of them. What you could do is you can do some kind of shorthand math. You can say, give me the length of the answers, -1. So we can say, be written this way. I think we're going to have to do for I in range. So this is probably not super popular. This syntax works in like JavaScript and C for sure, but we're probably going to have to do for I in of 0 to 5. That's probably what happens. Let's try this out. So if we type in Python here, let's do this for I in range to 5, and then we'll tab over and we'll print. Yeah, so that works. So what we did here, roll up a little. So we did for I in range of 0 to 5, print I, and then this is going to loop, kind of like our while loop as we're counting through. What this is going to do is it's going to say, for every number in the range between 0 and 5, give me it. And then we're going to print I out. So I starts at 0 because we're starting at the 0 location, and we're counting up to 5. So if we made that 6, it would go all the way up to 5, because we're not going to count the last one, because it's an up to range parameter. We can kind of see that if we hover over it with our IDE. If your IDE is pretty decent, you'll actually go ahead and you'll be able to see the doc strings from the class or function. In this case, range is a class. You can see because our IDE is telling us it's green here. So we'll go ahead and we'll loop through 0 to 5, which is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. So this is what we can do. And instead, what we can do here, instead of hard coding 5 here, is we'll give it the length of our question list. And then what we can do is we can do if ask question check answer, give it the question list, and we'll give it the answer. And then what we can do is we can say question correct amount plus plus. And I you want to fix that. So what we can do is we can count all the way. We can range over the whole question list, and technically we're not ranging over the question list. We're counting from 0 to the length of the question list. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the index location we're at. So first we'll start at 0, then we'll call the question list and the answer list, and we'll get the 0 location out. So we'll get what is my favorite color, and then we'll get blue, and we'll continue. So let's actually try this. Let's try this, and then we'll analyze the code a little bit. We got print error. Our for statement. notation expected in IntelliBlock app. For I in range, this if question answer. I don't want to be the person that's like, let's run it again. But let's run it again. Okay. I think I didn't save the main pie, and by the time I look back, I actually saved it. Force a habit. I always hit Control S, so you might not see me save the project or the pie file when working it. But if I move something around, you'll see that it's the white dot up here. And then if I hit Control S, you'll see it actually saves. Very important with Python and any coding language, make sure you're saving